Well, I have, but anyway, never fear. The party wants to devote the next week of campaigning to the subject of, oh yes, the long-term economic plan. You're going to be repeating it in your sleep. A little earlier, I spoke to the former Treasury Minister, Culture Secretary, Sajid Javid. You were 33% in the poll of polls when this campaign started. You've been banging on about the economy for over a month, and you're still 33% in the poll of polls. Why is your economic message not getting through?
Actually, I think the message is getting through, but what it shows is there's still more work to do. And what's going to matter is what actually happens on the poll on May the 7th.
But you haven't
one of the
moved
things
in
we
the
haven't
polls.
been shy about...
You haven't moved in the polls.
But what's going to matter is the final poll that takes place. And we make no apologies for focusing on the economy, and that focus will remain. Because it's only a strong economy at the end of the day that leads to a strong country. It's the only way to create the jobs that people rely on for the security of a pay packet, to make sure that we're building enough homes in this country.
I know the arguments.
Public services.
I know all the arguments. We've heard these arguments from you and other Conservatives again and again. My question is, why is that not getting through? Why are the polls not moving in your favour if the economic message is so strong?
Andrew, I think there's lots of people out there, as there is in every election, that are yet to make up their mind. Many of them probably haven't even really focused on the election until now in the final couple of weeks. And I am confident that when they do, and they look at the risks facing our country, they look, first of all, at our track record over the last 5 years, economic growth faster than any major industrialized country last year, a record creation of jobs. They will see that it's been a competent record, but also that there's more work to be done. And as they get closer to decision day, I think they'll realize the stark choice the country is facing.
Well, maybe it's because of things that you're not telling us. £30 billion of departmental cuts, unspecified. £12 billion of welfare cuts, details a secret. £10 billion of tax cuts, unfunded. £8 billion for the NHS, unfunded. Maybe people aren't voting for you because you're offering a menu without prices.
Well, actually, Andrew, I think that when we've talked about the economy, first of all, our track record speaks for itself. And clearly that has a bearing on what people might expect from a Conservative government. We've had this record growth rate. We've become the jobs factory of Europe. 1,000 jobs created every single day for the last 5 years. More jobs created in Britain than the rest of the EU put together.
But you won't tell us about that. We know all that.
We want to stick.
We know all that, Sajid Javid. You have been through that endlessly. But you won't tell us about the future. You won't give us any details of these things I've just listed. I'm not going to even waste my time today asking you about them because I know you will not answer them and people will not vote for a menu without prices.
Well, Andrew, I think we've been very clear about the future. We haven't shied away from saying there's still difficult decisions to make. We're still going to have spending reductions over the next 3 years, which are about £1 in every £100 the government's spending, £1 in every £10 being spent on welfare. That's the only way we can run a surplus and make sure this economic recovery continues. And there's been independent analysis of these plans. Just last week, the independent IFS, they compared, and I think rightly so, they compared our plans with Labour's plans. And they've said that Labour's plans will result in at least an additional £90 billion of extra borrowing, which means more interest payments on government debt, for example, money that's wasted away that could go on our public services.
Yes, but you also know what they had to say about your spending plans and the lack of detail and how you would pay for the tax cuts. So you're all pretty good at quoting that bit of the IFS you like and ignoring the bits you don't like. But let me ask you this. What's wrong with a slower pace of debt reduction, of deficit reduction? Borrowing has never been cheaper. You used to be in the financial markets. Even Spain and Italy, they've got much weaker economies than ours. They're borrowing for peanuts. Why not slow it down a bit and reduce the pain?
Because, Andrew, history has shown every country, and there's no exception, that just goes borrowing and borrowing and borrowing, will eventually get into an economic crisis. That has happened to European countries. It's happened to many other countries. And so we've got to take control of our debts. That means you don't have to reduce it overnight in day one, but you have to have a plan that works. Now, over the last 5 years, We've seen a steady reduction. The deficit is down by more than a half as a proportion of the economy. Of course, there's more work to do, but if we don't continue with that work, we risk economic crisis. That's the lesson from other countries. Right. It's also the lesson in Britain.
But the suggestion is not that you stop doing that. It's just that you do it at a little bit of a slower pace, as Labour and the Lib Dems are recommending, and then you don't have to go in for such brutal departmental cuts.
Well, I don't accept they've been brutal in any way whatsoever. First of all, we've protected key departments such as health and education. But in other departments, we've looked for savings, which overall, in terms of government spending, it's been about £1 in every £100 each year over the last 5 years. That's what companies can do. That's what households have done. And the government should be no different. It's possible to find these savings. You can also cut out waste. We've saved £20 billion a year from 2010 to now in terms of cutting out waste. And more of that can be done. But you need an approach which recognises the deficit, a continued deficit, is a threat to economic recovery. But also there's another reason. There's a moral reason. I don't think this generation should be passing on its bills to the next generation. If we want to consume more, then we should find a way to pay for it. We shouldn't be asking our children and our grandchildren to pay our bills. That's morally wrong too.
All right. Now, the other election ace you thought you had was Ed Miliband. That hasn't quite worked out, has it? The more you attack him, the more his personal poll ratings rise.
It's not about attacking him or any other individual. It's about, first of all, setting out our own policies, especially the economic success we've enjoyed. Well, it's not about attacking people. It's about having a positive program of change for the next 5 years, but using your track record of the last 5 years to show what can be done.
Excuse me, your cabinet colleague,
an economy that's growing and keep generating jobs, then we talk about our policies.
Sajid Javid, let's just get the facts right here. Your cabinet colleague, Defence Secretary Fallon, said he'd stabbed his brother in the back. He brought up a 5-year-old story. If that's not attacking Mr. Miliband, what is?
Well, the Defence Secretary was bringing up a legitimate issue about a difference in defence policy. And that's something that's got to be heard, it's got to be debated. Our nuclear deterrent is our insurance policy
and he made it
for a strong defence, and that can't be changed.
And it's not working.
Well,
his ratings are rising. The more you attack him, the more his ratings rise.
It was a debate about a policy, and that's what this election is about. And the key difference is this. We've got an economic plan. It's been working for 5 years. If the country now switches and changes to Nicola Sturgeon propping up a weak Ed Miliband government, it will be even more borrowing, even more debt, even more taxes, economic crisis, lost jobs, lost income, and higher mortgage rates. That's the difference.
Except that Ed Miliband said this morning on the BBC that he couldn't be clearer. There will be no coalition, no tie-ins. I'm not doing deals with the Scottish National Party. So can you stop scaremongering about a Labour-SNP alliance?
Well, actually, what he said, and I'm sure you heard this loud and clear from him, what he said was that he's not interested in a deal with anyone. He didn't say he's not willing to do a deal, and that's politician code speak for saying the door's wide open to a deal, and everyone knows that. Because
he says, I'm not doing deals with the Scottish National Party. What bit of that sentence is unclear?
He said again and again he's not interested in any deals. He didn't specifically refer to one party or the other. That was the question.
No, I'm sorry, he did. He referred to the Scottish National Party. I've got the transcript.
He said he's not interested in any deals. That is not the same as him saying he's not willing to do a deal. I think it's quite clear he's trying to be classy with his words and trying to be deliberately unclear. The clear issue now is that we can see that he is willing to do a deal, and he knows the numbers just don't work for him. Every poll shows in Scotland he's going to be wiped out. Almost every seat Labour could lose. And the only way he can form a government is to have some sort of deal with the SNP. There's no alternative to that. And the issue there, again, is the economy. If we have a Labour government, that's bad enough in terms of more borrowing, more spending and taxes. If it's a Labour government that's propped up by the SNP, it will mean even more borrowing, even more taxes and even more spending.
Prime Minister says your party will be the first to produce the first ethnic minority Prime Minister. But he didn't name you on his list of likely successors when he steps down. Why do you think that was?
Look, I think that the only election that matters is the one that's coming up on May the 7th. In terms of the Prime Minister's speech, I think what he pointed out in his speech, I think the one you're referring to yesterday, was saying that Britain, we saw under the Conservative, Britain's first female Prime Minister, we saw Britain's first Jewish Prime Minister, and what that really shows is that we, the Conservatives, are the party of opportunity for everyone, regardless of your background, where you've come from. It's a party that's based on merit.
Okay, thank you very much.